Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks again for joining me. So we've heard the good news that driving lessons can restart from the 4th of July, which is fantastic news for all of us. However, what's really important is to just have a moment to think about all the things that we need to consider before those lessons can restart. Now, for my students, I have put some guidance together that they will be all having a look at and all agreeing to. So I thought what I'd do in this video is to kind of go through that same guidance with you, just so that you can be aware of the things that your instructor might be asking of you prior to your lesson starting. Okie dokie, here we go. So before the lesson can even start, I'm going to ask my students 3 questions. The first one, the most important thing, is do they have the symptoms of COVID-19? Secondly, do they themselves fall into the high risk category? And if they do, that again, they're not eligible to start lessons straight away. And thirdly, does a member of their household or a relative that they're living with, again, fall into that high risk category? Now, if they come back and say that yes to one of those 3 questions, then clearly it's not appropriate for them to start lessons at this present time. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, actually, I do fall into one of those high risk categories, clearly it's a conversation that you need to have with your instructor. And certainly, if any of my students do fall into a high risk category or do present with symptoms over the next 7 days, then clearly we can't start lessons straight away. Just to reiterate, if you have forgotten, the symptoms of COVID-19 are a high temperature, a new or continuous cough, and also a loss of taste and smell. Now, that's not an exclusive list, but those are the 3 main symptoms that people are presenting with COVID-19. So in terms of PPE, I'm going to leave that very much down to my students in terms of what level they want to provide on their lessons. Now, I am going to insist that my students do provide their own PPE. The reason being is that I haven't increased lesson prices as we go back to starting lessons. So with that in mind, again, I'm going to ask my students to provide their own PPE. Clearly, if they forget or don't have any available prior to the lesson, then obviously I'm going to provide it, but where possible, I will insist that my students do provide their own. So if you need to provide your own level of protective equipment, PPE, I can recommend this online store to do it if you need to buy something. It's called the New Driver Program Store, and as you can see, it's got everything that you possibly might need to protect yourself during your lesson. So you've got things like disposable gloves, and you've also got things like hand sanitizer, wipes if you need them. But also it's got the face covering, so you've got the washable cotton face masks, but you've also got the disposable masks as well. So again, it's perhaps something that you might want to check out prior to lesson starting. So before the lesson commences, I'll make sure that I do a thorough deep clean on my car, using obviously things like antibacterial sprays and wipes. But here's a list of the areas that I will be cleaning before the start of each lesson. So those include door handles, both inside and out, the bonnet release lever, again both the inside and the outside lever, the windows and the mirror controls. I've recently purchased a washable seat cover, so that will make cleaning the seats far easier. The seat belt and the connector at the top, and obviously the hand controls, so the gear lever, steering wheel, the indicator and windscreen wiper stalks, and also the start-stop engine button. So before each lesson commences, I have a checklist that I'll be running through with each of my students before they get in the car. So let's have a look at that. Number one, prior to the lesson or arriving at the lesson, I will call or text just to make sure they've had no symptoms within the last 7 days or been in contact with anyone showing symptoms within the last 14 days. I'll make sure that they wash their hands for at least 20 seconds immediately before the lesson commences. If they decide to wear disposable gloves, I'll ask them to put them on just before getting into the car. In terms of the clothing that they are going to wear for the lesson, I'm going to make sure that the clothes that they decide cover both the arms and the legs. Before they even get into the car, we'll have a brief conversation just to assess that they are fine to start the lesson and had no symptoms. However, if symptoms do arise during the lesson, it will be immediately terminated and the date recorded. And finally, confirm that they have washed their hands, and if they haven't washed their hands prior to lesson starting, I'll provide hand sanitizer before they even enter into the car. So here are a few guidelines that I've put together for the lesson itself. Okay, number one, the windows will be open as much as possible depending on the weather conditions. Number two, the air conditioning will always be switched off. If at any point during the lesson we use my tablet for teaching purposes, only I will handle it. We will always sit facing forwards, and at no point will we face directly at each other. Lesson payment is always via bank transfer, and there will be no cash accepted on the lesson. If at any point I have to demonstrate a particular scenario or take control of the vehicle, I will wipe down the controls immediately after use. I will also remind you to wash your hands immediately after the lesson, so as soon as you get home, you'll have to wash your hands. It is your responsibility to inform me if you or anyone you're in contact with is unwell. And during the lesson, I will be responsible for disposing of any wipes that are used in a bin bag, and that were placed in my boot and obviously immediately disposed after the lesson. So here are a few things that I will do after I finish teaching for that day. So the first thing that I'll do when I get home is immediately wash my hands for at least 20 seconds. I'll also wash my clothes in the washing machine so that I'm always wearing clean clothes for the next day of teaching, and I'll then get a shower or a bath depending on how I'm feeling. So again, I'm keeping myself nice and clean. So hopefully that's not been too scary a video. Yes, it's exciting to be able to get back in the car and start teaching again, but what I wanted to get across was the importance that we do this right, and we're going to do this safely, so that I'm keeping myself safe, I'm keeping my students safe, and also keeping the examiners safe, so when they do get in my car, that it's thoroughly cleaned and that they are safe to do what they need to do. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the description below to my website where I'm putting the guidance, so again, if you want to have a go through that, please feel free to do it. I'll also put a link into the government website around the symptoms of COVID-19 and also about the high risk category, so again, have a look at that if you think that's perhaps you need to have a look at that. Any questions in the meantime, please feel free to drop me a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But again, look forward to your lessons. It is exciting time, but it's just about keeping us safe. In the meantime, what would be fantastic is, as always, if you can subscribe to the channel and also press the bell icon for notifications of future video releases. In the meantime, stay safe, look after yourself, look forward to your lessons, but let's do it safely. Take care, see you soon.